There's something about stories of people trapped in impossible situations that hit different than any other kind of narrative. We're drawn to them because deep down, we all feel trapped sometimes. Trapped by circumstance, by our mistakes, by systems we can't control, by life itself. Hollywood loves giving us prison movies, escape stories, tales of people breaking free from chains, both literal and metaphorical. We've seen classics like Cool Hand Luke, Escape from Alcatraz, The Green Mile, all exploring what it means to survive when the world has locked you away. But there's one film, one character, that doesn't just survive imprisonment, he transforms it. He turns a living tomb into a launching pad. He makes hope itself into an act of rebellion so profound that it reshapes everyone around him. This character is Andy Dufresne, and his story in The Shawshank Redemption isn't just about escaping prison. It's about the triumph of hope over despair, patience over rage, and humanity over institutionalization. This is a deep dive into why Andy Dufresne represents one of the most perfectly executed character arcs in cinema history. Let's start from the beginning. The year is 1947, and we open on a courtroom where a young banker named Andy Dufresne sits accused of murdering his wife and her lover. The prosecution paints him as a cold, calculated killer who got drunk, grabbed a gun, and executed them both in a crime of passion. Andy sits there, emotionless, almost robotic in his composure. The evidence is damning. His gun, the bullets match, he has no alibi, and he admits he was near the scene. The jury delivers their verdict, and Andy is sentenced to 2 life sentences back-to-back at Shawshank State Penitentiary. What's crucial here is Andy's demeanor. He doesn't break down. He doesn't plead. He simply accepts his fate with this eerie calm that will define him throughout the entire film. Now, here's where it gets interesting. We never actually see the murders happen. We see Andy in his car with the gun, drunk and angry, but the film never confirms whether he went through with it. This ambiguity is intentional because The Shawshank Redemption isn't really about whether Andy is innocent or guilty. It's about what he does with his circumstances, regardless. Andy arrives at Shawshank in 1947 on a bus full of new prisoners, what the veterans call fresh fish. Red, our narrator, and a lifer who's been denied parole multiple times, watches the new arrivals and makes bets with the other inmates about which fresh fish will break down crying their first night. Red is convinced it won't be Andy because he looks too confident, too put together. But someone else wins the bet that night when a different prisoner breaks. Andy doesn't make a sound. From the very first night, there's something different about this guy. While other prisoners are screaming, crying, begging for their mothers, Andy Dufresne lies on his bunk, silent and calculating. Red later admits he thought Andy was cold, maybe even dead inside. But that wasn't it at all. Andy was already planning, already thinking, already refusing to let Shawshank break him the way it breaks everyone else. The early days at Shawshank are brutal for Andy. There's this group called the Sisters, led by a monster named Boggs Diamond, and they target Andy specifically. They assault him repeatedly in the laundry room, in the showers, anywhere they can corner him. And here's what's important. Andy never stops fighting back. He loses every single time. He gets beaten within an inch of his life over and over, but he never gives in. He never submits. Red tells us that the Sisters kept at Andy for nearly 2 years, and in all that time, Andy never once screamed. Think about that. 2 years of systematic brutalization, and this man refuses to give them the satisfaction of hearing him break. That's not coldness, that's inhuman levels of willpower. It's during this period that Andy approaches Red, who's known as the guy who can get you things on the inside. Andy asks for a rock hammer, one of those small geological tools for shaping rocks. Red thinks it's funny because the thing is tiny, maybe 6 or 7 inches long, and he jokes that Andy would need about 600 years to tunnel out with it. He gets Andy the rock hammer. This moment right here is the most important piece of foreshadowing in the entire film, and nobody realizes it on first watch. Red literally tells us exactly how long it should take to escape with that hammer, and we all just laugh it off because it seems impossible. Andy starts collecting rocks. He gets interested in geology, starts shaping little chess pieces from stone. The other prisoners think he's just found a hobby to keep himself sane. Red thinks Andy is building himself a little fantasy world to escape into mentally since he can't escape physically. Nobody understands what's really happening. Nobody except Andy. But before we get to that, we need to talk about the moment Andy begins to reclaim his humanity, and in doing so, helps Red and the other prisoners reclaim theirs. It's a spring day in 1949, and Andy and some other prisoners are tarring the roof of the license plate factory. The guards are there, including Captain Hadley, this brutal piece of work who rules through violence and intimidation. Hadley is complaining loudly about taxes, about how he's going to get by the IRS because his brother died and left him $35,000. Andy, who's been silent this whole time, speaks up. He tells Hadley that there's a loophole, a legal way to gift that money to his wife tax-free. Hadley nearly throws Andy off the roof for talking out of turn, but Andy doesn't back down. He explains the whole process calmly, professionally. like he's back in his bank office and not on a prison roof talking to a man who could kill him. The result is one of the most beautiful scenes in cinema. Andy negotiates for his fellow prisoners to get beer during their break. Cold, bohemian-style beer on a spring rooftop. Red narrates that Andy didn't drink his beer. He just sat there watching his friends drink, and for a moment, just a moment, they felt like free men. They felt human again. Red says Andy did it to feel normal again, to remember what it was like when he could do things for people. This scene is crucial because it establishes Andy's real power. It's not physical strength. It's not violence. It's his mind, his expertise, and his absolute refusal to let Shawshank strip away who he was before. From that point on, Andy becomes the prison's unofficial financial advisor. He does tax returns for all the guards, he helps the warden with his finances, and because of this, he gets protection. The sisters get warned off. Boggs Diamond ends up beaten so badly by Hadley that he never walks again, and he's transferred to a minimum security hospital where they feed him through a tube for the rest of his life. Andy gets moved to a better cell, one that used to belong to an older prisoner, and on the wall of that cell is a poster of Rita Hayworth. Now, Andy also starts working in the prison library with Brooks Hatlin, this old man who's been institutionalized for 50 years. Andy begins writing letters to the state legislature every week asking for funding to expand the library. One letter every week for 6 years. Think about that patience. 6 years of writing letters that probably get thrown in the trash. But Andy doesn't give up, and eventually the state sends $200 and some old books. Andy's reaction is to start writing 2 letters a week. His persistence pays off, and the library grows. This is important because the library becomes a symbol of Andy's impact on Shawshank. He's literally bringing education, culture, and hope into a place designed to crush all three. Red gets a job in the library as Andy's assistant, and their friendship deepens. They play chess, they talk about life and dreams and what it means to hope for anything when you're serving life sentences. Red admits he's institutionalized. He's been in Shawshank so long that he wouldn't know how to function on the outside. The prison has become his home, his identity. He can't imagine being anyone other than a prisoner. But Andy refuses to accept that for himself. One day, Andy locks himself in the warden's office and plays an opera record over the prison's loudspeaker system. The Marriage of Figaro by Mozart echoes across the yard, and every single prisoner stops what they're doing. They stand there listening to this beautiful, soaring music that has nothing to do with prison, nothing to do with their crimes, nothing to do with the walls around them. For those few minutes, they're transported. Red narrates that he has no idea what those Italian ladies were singing about, but he didn't need to. It was something so beautiful it couldn't be expressed in words. It made him remember there was something inside of them that the guards and the warden couldn't touch, couldn't get to, couldn't kill. Andy spends 2 weeks in solitary confinement for that stunt. When he gets out, Red asks if it was worth it. Andy says it was the easiest time he ever did because he had Mozart in his head. He taps his temple and says, "That's the beauty of music. They can't take that away from you." This scene establishes Andy's philosophy. Hope, beauty, humanity, these things exist internally. The prison can lock up his body, but it can't imprison his mind or his spirit unless he lets it. The library continues to grow, and Andy continues to help the guards with their finances. He becomes indispensable to Warden Norton, this corrupt hypocrite who quotes the Bible while running a slave labor program where he loans out prisoners to construction sites for next to nothing, undercutting legitimate workers and pocketing the difference. Andy realizes what's happening, and Norton brings him in on it, making Andy launder all the dirty money through fake accounts and shell corporations. Andy has no choice but to comply. But even here, he's playing a longer game than anyone realizes. Years pass. Brooks gets paroled after 50 years, and he can't handle freedom. He's so institutionalized that he considers committing a crime just to get sent back. Instead, he gets a job bagging groceries, lives in a halfway house, and feels invisible and useless. He carves his name into a beam in his room and hangs himself. Red reads the letter Brooks left behind, and it's devastating. Brooks writes that the outside world moves too fast, that he feels trapped even though he's free, that after 50 years in prison, he can't remember what it felt like to be a man. This is the film showing us the real tragedy of long-term imprisonment. It's not just taking away your years, it's taking away your ability to exist outside the system that confined you. Then, in 1965, everything changes. A young prisoner named Tommy Williams arrives at Shawshank. Tommy is different from most prisoners. He's energetic, optimistic, wants to learn. Andy starts tutoring him, helping him study for his GED. They become friends, and one night, Tommy tells a story about his old cellmate at another prison. This cellmate used to brag about a banker he framed for murder, how he killed the banker's wife and her lover and let the husband take the fall. Andy's face goes pale. The dates match. The details match. This cellmate, Elmo Blatch, is the real killer. Andy finally has proof of his innocence. He goes to Warden Norton with this information, asking for a new trial or at least an investigation. This is Andy's big mistake. He's been so patient, so careful, so controlled for 17 years. But the possibility of freedom makes him sloppy. He pushes Norton too hard, threatens him, tells him he'll expose the money laundering operation if Norton doesn't help him. Norton isn't about to lose his best money man, and he sure as hell isn't going to let Andy expose his corruption. He has Captain Hadley take Tommy out to the yard one night, and Tommy is shot dead. The official story is he tried to escape. Andy knows the truth. Andy gets thrown in solitary for a month. When he comes out, he's different. The light in his eyes is gone. He looks defeated in a way we've never seen before. Red is worried about him. Andy talks about Mexico, about this little beach town called Zihuatanejo on the Pacific coast, where the water is blue and warm and a man could open a little hotel. He asks Red to promise that if he ever gets out, he'll go to a specific hayfield near Buxton and find something Andy buried there under a volcanic rock. Red thinks Andy is talking crazy. He thinks Andy might hurt himself. That night there's a storm and Andy doesn't show up for lights out. The next morning the guards find his cell empty. The poster on his wall, now featuring Raquel Welch, is torn off, revealing a tunnel behind it. Andy Dufresne crawled through that tunnel into the sewage pipe and through 500 yards of raw sewage that would make you puke to even think about. Red tells us that Andy crawled through a river of Dodd and came out clean on the other side. The reveal that Andy had been digging that tunnel for 19 years hits like a freight train. Every single moment in the film gets recontextualized. The rock hammer that Red joked would take 600 years to dig through the wall actually only took 19. Every night while his cellmates slept, Andy chipped away at that wall. He used his rock collection hobby to disguise the concrete dust. He used the posters, first Rita Hayworth, then Marilyn Monroe, then Raquel Welch, to hide the growing hole. The geological patience Red had noticed wasn't just a personality trait. It was a literal description of Andy's escape method. Geology is the study of pressure and time. Andy understood both. He applied pressure consistently over time and broke through something that seemed impossible. When he emerged from that sewage pipe in the storm, Andy spread his arms in the rain like he's being baptized, reborn. He's washing away 19 years of Shawshank filth. The next morning, Andy Dufresne walked into multiple banks dressed as Randall Stevens, the fake identity he'd created for Warden Norton's money laundering operation. He withdrew every penny of the dirty money, over $370,000. Then, he sent evidence of Norton's crimes to the newspaper. The police raid Shawshank. Captain Hadley gets arrested. Warden Norton opens his safe to find it empty except for Andy's Bible, hollowed out to hide the rock hammer. Inside, Andy had written a note. The warden reads it and there's this beautiful biblical irony. Throughout the film, Norton had quoted scripture, particularly the verse about salvation being inside, meaning salvation through Christ. Andy's note essentially says salvation was inside all right, inside that book, because that's where he hid the tool of his escape. Warden Norton shoots himself rather than face justice. Red tells us that Andy Dufresne, who crawled through a river of, and came out clean on the other side, was headed for the Pacific, for a place with no memory, where a man could put his past behind him. But before we talk about what Andy's escape means thematically, we need to understand what makes this character arc so perfectly constructed. Andy's triumph isn't about the cleverness of his escape plan, though that is brilliant. It's about what he represents as a human being facing inhuman circumstances. From the moment Andy arrives at Shawshank, he's dealing with a system designed to break him. The prison isn't just about punishment. It's about crushing hope, erasing identity, and making prisoners believe they deserve their suffering. Every institution in the film, from the corrupt courts that wrongly convicted him, to the brutal prison that tortures him, to the hypocritical warden who exploits him, is rigged against Andy. A normal person would break. Red breaks. Brooks breaks. Every prisoner we meet has been broken by Shawshank, in one way or another. But Andy doesn't break. He bends. He adapts. He survives. And most importantly, he never stops being Andy Dufresne. The film asks a fundamental question that resonates beyond prison walls. How do you maintain hope when hope seems irrational? How do you keep your humanity in a place designed to strip it away? How do you stay yourself when the world is trying to turn you into something else? Andy's answer is remarkable. He doesn't resist through violence or rage or even open rebellion most of the time. He resists through patience, through small acts of beauty, through helping others, and through never forgetting who he was before Shawshank. Every time Andy does someone's taxes, he's asserting his identity as a banker. Every time he works on the library, he's asserting his belief in education and culture. Every time he plays Mozart over the speakers or shares a beer with his friends or tutors Tommy, he's asserting his humanity. And every single night for 19 years, he chips away at that wall, asserting his refusal to accept his imprisonment as permanent. This is what makes Andy different from every other prison movie protagonist. He's not looking for revenge. He's not trying to prove his innocence for most of the film. He's simply refusing to let Shawshank define him. Red serves as the perfect contrast to Andy. Red has been institutionalized. He's comfortable in prison because he's forgotten how to be anything else. He goes to his parole hearings and says what he thinks they want to hear, but he doesn't believe it himself. He's accepted that he's a prisoner, and that's all he'll ever be. When Brooks kills himself after being released, Red understands why. He sees himself in Brooks, sees his own future if he ever gets paroled. This is why Andy's impact on Red is so profound. Andy refuses to accept institutionalization as inevitable. He tells Red that hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. Red disagrees. He says hope is a dangerous thing in prison, that it can drive a man insane. This philosophical debate between them is the heart of the film. Is hope rational or delusional? Is it strength or weakness? Andy proves through his actions that hope is the most powerful force a person can possess. Not blind optimism or naive faith that things will magically get better, but active, determined hope that drives you to take concrete actions toward a better future, even when that future seems impossible. The film's structure is brilliant in how it reveals Andy's plan. On first viewing, we're in Red's perspective. We see Andy as this mysterious, unknowable figure. We think he's maybe too cold, too detached. We worry about him when he talks about Mexico after Tommy's death, thinking he might be suicidal. The poster on his wall seems like just a decoration, a small comfort in a harsh place. But when the tunnel is revealed, the entire film flips. We realize Andy has been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Every moment of patience, every act of service to the warden, every request for a poster or rock hammer, it was all part of a plan so long-term and so carefully executed that nobody suspected a thing. This recontextualization is what makes The Shawshank Redemption work on multiple viewings. You watch it again knowing Andy's secret, and suddenly every scene has double meaning. When Andy asks Red for the rock hammer and Red jokes about 600 years, Andy just smiles. He knows it won't take that long. When Andy gets protective custody after helping Hadley with his taxes, he knows that protection will let him dig without interruption. When he becomes indispensable to Norton through money laundering, he knows he's building both his cover and his future funding. Everything connects. But here's what elevates The Shawshank Redemption from a clever prison escape movie to a profound meditation on hope. Andy doesn't just escape physically. He escapes spiritually and psychologically too. Shawshank never becomes his home the way it becomes Red's home. Shawshank never becomes his identity. After 19 years in prison, Andy Dufresne is still Andy Dufresne. He hasn't been reformed or rehabilitated because he was never really guilty of anything except being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The prison couldn't break him because he never accepted its authority over his soul. When he emerges from that sewage pipe and spreads his arms in the rain, it's not just freedom from physical captivity. It's vindication that he was right to hope, right to plan, right to believe that patience and pressure over time could accomplish the impossible. The film also explores institutionalization as a form of psychological imprisonment that's harder to escape than any physical cell. Brooks is the clearest example. He spent 50 years in Shawshank, and when he gets out, he's more trapped than when he was in prison. He can't handle the pace of modern life. He can't find meaning or purpose. He feels invisible. The halfway house is technically freedom, but it feels worse than his cell. At least in Shawshank, he had a role, a function, an identity as the librarian. On the outside, he's nobody, just another old man society has no use for. This is the film's darkest message. Long-term imprisonment doesn't just take your time. It takes your ability to be free. It makes you dependent on the very system that's punishing you. Brooks's suicide is devastating precisely because it shows that sometimes the damage is permanent. Sometimes people can't recover from what's been done to them. Red faces the same struggle after he finally gets paroled following 40 years in Shawshank. He gets the same halfway house room Brooks had, the same job bagging groceries, the same feeling of invisibility and uselessness. He considers violating parole just to get sent back, because at least in prison he knew who he was and where he belonged. Red is standing on the edge of Brooks's fate, about to give up and either end his life or get himself reincarcerated. But then he remembers Andy. He remembers Andy's words about hope. He remembers his promise to go to that hayfield in Buxton. So Red violates parole not to get caught, but to go find whatever Andy buried. Under that volcanic rock, he finds a metal box containing cash and a letter. Andy writes that he remembers Red said he'd never make it on the outside, that he's institutionalized. But Andy hopes he's wrong. He hopes Red will come to Zihuatanejo. Hope being the thing Red claimed was dangerous in prison, the thing that could drive a man insane. Andy turned hope into a lifeline. The final scene of Red hitchhiking toward the Pacific, toward Zihuatanejo, toward a reunion with his friend, is perfect. Red narrates that he hopes the Pacific is as blue as it is in his dreams. He hopes to see his friend and shake his hand. He hopes. That word appears 3 times in his final narration. The man who said hope was dangerous has learned to hope again. And we see him walking across that beach toward Andy, who's working on his boat. The shot is from far away, deliberately not letting us hear their reunion, because that moment isn't for us. It's for them. It's private and earned and beautiful. Red has escaped not just Shawshank the place, but Shawshank the mindset. He's free in every sense that matters. So what does Andy Dufresne's story mean beyond the specifics of prison and escape? Andy represents the power of maintaining your identity when the world tries to destroy it. He represents patience as a weapon against systems designed to crush you quickly. He represents the idea that hope isn't naive or delusional. Hope is pragmatic. Hope is what drives action. Hope is what keeps you chipping away at an impossible wall night after night for 19 years because you believe the wall will eventually break. Andy's triumph is that he refused to accept the verdict, not just the legal verdict that wrongly convicted him, but the social verdict that he was now a prisoner and that's all he would ever be. He rejected the identity Shawshank tried to force on him. He maintained his skills, his interests, his personality, his dreams, and when the time came, he was ready to step back into the world as himself. The film is ultimately about freedom in all its forms. Physical freedom from literal prison, psychological freedom from institutionalization, spiritual freedom from despair. Andy achieves all three. Red, through Andy's influence, achieves them too. The Shawshank Redemption isn't really about redemption in the religious sense, despite all the biblical imagery. It's about redemption in the human sense, reclaiming yourself from systems and circumstances that tried to erase you. Andy redeems not just his own life, but Red's life too. And through Red's narration, potentially the lives of everyone watching who sees something of themselves in these men trapped by circumstances they can't fully control. We're all institutionalized to some degree. We all have walls we feel trapped behind. We all have systems telling us who we're supposed to be and what we're allowed to hope for. Andy's message is simple but profound. Get busy living, or get busy dying. Choose hope over despair. Choose patience over rage. Choose humanity over bitterness. And most importantly, never stop being who you are at your core. The world will try to break you, try to reshape you, try to make you forget yourself. Don't let it chip away at the wall. Every day, bit by bit, piece by piece, no matter how impossible it seems, because pressure and time, that's all it takes. Geology of the soul. And if you're patient enough, if you're determined enough, if you refuse to give up hope, one day you'll break through. One day you'll crawl through the sewage and emerge clean on the other side. One day you'll spread your arms in the rain and feel free. Andy Dufresne shows us it's possible. Not easy, not quick, but possible. Do you think you could maintain hope in Andy's situation? Could you spend 19 years chipping away at a wall in secret, never knowing if you'd live long enough to finish? What's your wall? The thing that seems impossible but you chip away at anyway. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts. And if you made it to the end of this video, please leave a like and subscribe.